Hey guys, this is Christian, and today we are reviewing the Minisforum MS-R1. This was recently sent to me by Minisforum, and honestly, I was really excited about holding it in my hands because this little thing here is no regular x86 Intel or AMD CPU. It is the world's first ARM mini workstation with a proper UEFI boot. You might be wondering why I'm so excited about it. Well, that's because ARM is well known for being incredibly power efficient. You probably are familiar with the Raspberry Pi. That's a great example for a small and power-efficient ARM-based mini computer that's often used in home labs or for experiments. But here's the problem. When you need a little more power than a Raspberry Pi, you didn't really have many choices in the ARM world. Sure, there are enterprise-grade ARM servers that usually cost maybe more than $2,000 or $3,000. But until now, there wasn't really something in between that. And that's exactly where this Minisforum MS-R1 is supposed to fit in. It's a device that costs around like $500 to $600, depending on what upgrade you want. You can get it with 32 gigabytes of memory or 64 gigabytes of memory. That, of course, costs a little more. And yeah, honestly, guys, that just sounded too good to be true. A powerful but efficient ARM-based system that could be just amazing for home labs. And yeah, after testing it, I could say it isn't quite what I expected. But yeah, let's start simple and just go over the hardware specs here. As I said, this is the world's first ARM mini workstation supporting UEFI. Why is that a big deal? Well, that means you can just use this thing like a regular PC and just install any ARM-compatible operating system on it, like Ubuntu ARM, Debian ARM, whatever. Any ARM-compatible applications will run on it. You can even run a custom version of Proxmox on ARM or even Windows on ARM if for whatever reason you want to do that. But yeah, the freedom is your choice. The special thing about this is that it has a Chinese ARM SoC. So this is the CIX CP8180 that comes with 12 cores, 12 threads, 2.6 gigahertz, and a 28 watts TDP. Honestly, that's already interesting because we usually see Qualcomm or Apple in this space. It also has an NPU for some AI stuff with 28.8 TOPS. Honestly, I haven't tested how good the AI chip is on this little thing, but yeah, you might find some other benchmarks on this system somewhere on the internet as well. My take on this chip is that it sounds decent on paper, but it's a relatively unknown chip, so we'll need to test real-world performance. And 28 watts sounds efficient, but it has a small problem with idle power consumption. More about that later. It also comes with a 32 or 64 gigabytes of LPDDR5 5500 MHz RAM, which is of course soldered, so you cannot upgrade it, but it has ECC, the error correction code, on board, which is really rare for any consumer mini PCs, especially for building storage devices. ECC support might be interesting. For storage, it has a dual M4 NVMe slot, both full size, and this is really great, so you can run any RAID systems or install separate operating systems or add storage hard drives. There's also a dual 10 gigabit Ethernet port on this thing, which is using a Realtek chip. I've used that same network chip for my OpenSense firewall, although many people told me to not do that, but for me it always worked completely fine. So I never had any issues with that chip. It also has a full-sized X16 slot, which is running on PCI Express 4.0, so you can add a powerful GPU. I mean, good luck finding ARM drivers though, but more importantly, you could add a quad-port network card, you could add capture cards, or whatever you want to extend this mini PC with. And this is really nice. It's small, it sits nicely on a desk without taking too much space. The chassis is probably the best part on this system. You just open it by pressing a little button on the side, and then you can just slide out the entire motherboard, giving you full access to all of the components inside. It's really great when you quickly need to swap storage or add a PCI Express expansion card or change anything inside. You quickly get access to all the components, and the build quality is again really solid. Absolutely love this. More importantly, I also ran a Geekbench. Here are the results. So for single core score, it has 1326 and a 6510 multi-core score. Undoubtedly much more that you would get on a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi 5 usually has like 700 single core, and about 2000 multi-core score performance. Actually, it's quite near to the Apple M1 Mac Mini. That, by the way, has a 2000 single core and about 8700 multi-core score performance. So this is somewhere in between the performance of a Raspberry Pi 5 and an Apple M1 Mac Mini. Of course, more in the range of the Apple system, obviously. So you get about like 2 or 3 times the performance of a single Raspberry Pi 5. But of course, you also have to take in consideration that you're probably paying like 2 or 3 times the price. I've also tested the power consumption, and this is where things are getting a little weird here. Because honestly, I was expecting a much lower idle power consumption. I've tested about like 19 watts on idle, and when I was running Geekbench, the power consumption went up to 32 watts. I really thought that it would have a much lower power consumption, but that probably depends on the Chinese SoC chip that is maybe not really optimized for power efficiency on idle. I've seen much lower idle power consumptions on equivalent x86 CPUs, to be honest. So for example, my OpenSense firewall, which has a similar Minisforum system, runs the AMD Ryzen 5 8500G, which has a single core score of 2300 and a multi-core score of 9444. I think the idle power consumption I've measured on this device is about, let me not lie, but I think it's about like 7 watts on idle or so. So it's less than half of the idle power consumption of the Minisforum MS-R1 and still has much more power. I think this is also a problem that Minisforum itself noticed on this chip here, because they just updated a Git repository where they share some guidance on how to reinstall the operating system or install Proxmox VE for ARM systems. They also have a specific page for optimized idle power, where they admit that when the MS-R1 was released, the idle power consumption was not adequately optimized. They say they are trying to optimize the power consumption, and this documentation contains a link to a Google Drive share where you can download a newer firmware, and that would bring down the idle power consumption down to 1412.7 watts. But this is still more than the AMD Ryzen CPUs are consuming. And I think it is also a little more than their more powerful MSA1 or MSA2 systems. So although I heard so many great things about ARM system being so power efficient, when you compare this to another x86 mini PC, honestly, this thing really falls behind in terms of power consumption, in terms of power efficiency, in terms of performance in general, and of course in compatibility, because we're still talking about an ARM-based system, so not every application runs on it. Although the support on ARM systems has really become better. But if you're thinking about getting this system here because you want a powerful but power efficient mini PC for your home lab, I generally would not recommend it, because in my opinion, there are better x86 mini PCs that have a better compatibility and better power efficiency, better performance, and lower idle power consumption. However, I still think this system is not completely useless. Yeah, there are scenarios where you would definitely want to get one of these, because if you're searching for a great ARM development or testing machine, this thing is obviously much more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, but it's not so expensive than these enterprise-grade ARM-based systems that you get from NVIDIA or from other companies. So if you need something more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, but it has to be ARM because you're using this for testing or development stuff, it's still great that we have this device, because the fact that we don't have many options for ARM-based systems on the desktop is a chicken and egg problem. Someone just needed to start, and I really love that we have this thing. Maybe the second version of the Minisforum R series is gonna get better. Maybe these Chinese SoC boards are getting more efficient, are getting better with the next evolution. So I'm definitely following up on this. So yeah, that's my review on the Minisforum MS-R1. I hope it helped you to find out whether this thing might be something for you or not. So thank you so much for watching. Again, a big thanks goes out to Minisforum for sending me this device, and to all of my supporters. You guys are really amazing. You are making all of this possible. And of course, I'm gonna catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.